So, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was on television town hall on Friday with Chris Hayes, and it was exactly what we could expect from the fresh new star of the Democratic Party, basically just more dumb things, like always. Recently, the Green New Deal, proposed by AOC, was voted down in the Senate, with no senators voting yes and 57 voting no.
Elitist issue. This is a quality of life issue. You want to tell people that their concern and their desire for clean air and clean water is elitist? Tell that to the kids in the South Bronx, which are suffering from the highest rates of childhood asthma in the country. Tell that to the families in Flint, whose kids have their blood is ascending in lead levels. Their brains are damaged for the rest of their lives. Call them elitist. You're telling them that those kids are trying to get on a plane to Davos? People are dying. They are dying, and the response across the other side of the aisle is to introduce an amendment 5 minutes before a hearing in a markup. This is serious. This should not be a partisan issue. This is about our constituents and all of our lives. Iowa, Nebraska, broad swaths of the Midwest are drowning right now, underwater. Farms, towns that will never be recovered and never come back. And we're here, and people are more concerned about helping oil companies than helping their own families? I don't think so. I don't think so. This is about our lives. This is about American lives. And it should not be partisan. Science should not be partisan. We are facing a national crisis. And if we do not ascend to that crisis, if we do not ascend to the levels in which we were threatened at the Great Depression, when we were threatened in World War II, if we do not ascend to those levels, if we tell the American public that we are more willing to invest and bail out big banks than we are willing to invest in our farmers and our urban families, then I don't know what we're here doing.
So even though you may think that she's the future of the Democratic Party, it may not actually be true, since when we can actually see some actions from other Democrats and when they can actually support her, nobody actually voted for the Green New Deal. So even other Democrats who are trying to appease the Democratic base with talking flattery about the Green New Deal, AOC and other Democrats, they actually know that this is just insanity and normal people don't support it. That's why we see that her ratings are not that good at all, despite all the media coverage she got. To remind you, she was already on the cover of Time magazine, and she was also on the cover of Rolling Stone with her other fresh Democrats in the Senate. And it's worth mentioning that she's just a new congresswoman from the extreme blue district with a majority-minority demographic, so it's not like she achieved some extraordinary success like the media would like you to believe. Despite all the good media coverage she gets on a daily basis, her approval rating is still pretty low. According to a Quinnipiac poll released last Thursday, it found that only 23% of Americans had a favorable view of AOC, while 36% had an unfavorable view. That's overall a 13% approval rating. Just to remind you, some of the dumb statements she made in the past include saying that the world is going to end in 12 years if we don't do something about the climate change. She also compared global warming with World War II, and implicitly equating the threat of Germany in the 1940s with the current state of global warming.
You know, Gen Z and all these folks that come after us are looking up, and we're like, the world is going to end in 12 years if we don't address climate change. And your biggest issue is, your bigged issue is, how are we going to pay for it? And like, this is the war, this is our World War II. And I think for younger people, we're looking at this and we're like, how are we saying let's take it easy when 3,000 Americans died last year?
And also, in her Green New Deal, she advocated for zero usage of fossil fuels in 12 years. She also said that cow farts are a threat to our environment and that basically anybody should get paid somehow, even if they're not willing to work.
We need to innovate on our technology. You know, obviously, like I had a staffer, released a document that talked about cow flatulence, but
which is an issue. I just want to say,
is an issue, but here's
it sounds
the thing.
ridiculous, but it literally is an issue.
But it actually is an issue when it comes to contributing to methane.
Right.
But that doesn't mean you end cows. It means that we need. What it means is that we need to innovate and change our grain, our cow grain from which they feed in these troughs. That we need to really take a look at regenerative agriculture. Like, these are our solutions.
That's not the full list of the dumb things she said, but you get the gist of it. Now let's listen to Ben Shapiro breaking down her latest appearance on MSNBC show with Chris Hayes, who, by the way, did a terrible job interviewing her, with just throwing softball questions at her, even though he is probably aware that she doesn't know what she's talking about.
Democrats continue to demonstrate that they really don't know a lot of things. And leading the charge is, of course, the inimitable Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Over the weekend, she suggested that she wants people to debate her, which is odd since when I actually challenged her to a debate, she accused me of catcalling, so there's that. But she had herself a very weird episode of Chris Hayes, All In with Chris Hayes on MSNBC, in which she said a bunch of things that make no sense. And yet she continues to be hailed as some sort of thought leader for the Democratic Party, which is pretty amazing since she doesn't have lots of thoughts. But she doubled down on the notion that we are at risk from cow farts. She doubled down on her Green New Deal. Here is AOC, thought leader of the Democratic Party, continuing to push this nonsense.
We need to innovate on our technology. Right. Obviously, like I had a staffer, release a document that talked about cow flatulence, but
which is an issue. I just want to say,
an issue. But here's
it sounds ridiculous, but it literally is an issue.
But it actually is an issue when it comes to contributing to methane.
Right.
But that doesn't mean you end cows. It means that we need. What it means is that we need to innovate and change our grain, our cow grain from which they feed in these troughs. That we need to really take a look at regenerative agriculture. Like these are our solutions.
Right. What is regenerative agriculture? Like maybe she's just too smart for me. I don't know what the hell she's talking about when she says we have to feed them different grains. Like what, Pepto-Bismol or what? And it literally says in her Green New Deal, frequently asked questions, that we have to end cows. So I'm glad that she's running away from that. At least she realizes that was a bad idea. Then she blamed her staff for the rollout of the Green New Deal. She says, oh yeah, that wasn't my fault. That was my staff's fault. It was because they rolled out a draft version of the frequently asked questions. Now, this is just a lie, what you're about to hear, because they rolled out this draft supposedly online. There was no final draft that came after that. Now, normally, there have been cases at Daily Wire where somebody accidentally approves a draft of an article. And you know what we do? We then correct and update the article as soon as possible, meaning like within the hour. We're now like 2 months later, and she still has not released a full frequently asked question. So that was not a draft. That was her final version, and she only realized it was a bad idea after it was released to the public. Nonetheless, here she is blaming her staff for the rollout.
You guys issued an FAQ. It had some things that people thought were ridiculous and radical, like anyone that was unable or unwilling to work would be guaranteed a job. The FAQ was withdrawn and said it was preliminary, a draft. There was a lot of fight about that. Like, do you think you guys rolled it out the right way? Did you bring it any on yourself?
What I will say is that I definitely had a staffer that had a very bad day at work and did release a working draft early. So I get that that's what they're seizing on. But really what we need to do is have a serious conversation.
I'm so sick of her calling for a serious conversation when she won't have one with anyone of merit. Chris Hayes just throws her softball after softball and she's like, oh, let's have a serious conversation. Really? What's your serious conversation? Is your serious conversation that everybody who criticizes you is in the pay of nefarious right-wing forces? Is your serious conversation that everybody who criticizes you is latently a sexist or a bigot? Is that your serious conversation, AOC? Maybe people who criticize you because you don't know things, because you say dumb crap on a regular basis. E.g., same interview, she explains that Congress passed an amendment to the Constitution to prevent FDR from being reelected. Let me explain why this is dumb in 1 second.
When our party was boldest, the time of the New Deal, the Great Society, the Civil Rights Act, and so on, we had and carried supermajorities in the House, in the Senate. We carried the presidency. They had to amend the Constitution of the United States to make sure Roosevelt did not get reelected. And there were so many extraordinary things that were happening in that time that were uniting working people.
No. No. That is just not true. So it is true that Democrats were winning enormous majorities in the middle of the Great Depression because people were blaming Herbert Hoover and the Republicans for all of that. It is also true that Congress was, in fact, regained by Republicans at some point during this period. But it is also true, wait, hold up. Just hold up for 1 second. Is she claiming that the 22nd Amendment to the Constitution was passed to prevent FDR from winning another election? Is that the actual contention? Because it was actually ratified. The completed ratification happened in 1951. That was the last state to ratify. That was Alabama, which ratified in 1951. FDR died in 1944. They started the initiation of this process after his death. So how did they pass a constitutional amendment to stop him from serving after he was dead? What? Okay, but it's okay. She knows things, guys. She knows things. The beauty of being a Democrat is that no matter how radical you are, there are always members of the media like Chris Hayes to defend you.